How do you run a marathon? How do you become a millionaire? Believe it or not, it's the same process. Start small. Making small investments in your fitness and your savings account is the best way to start. Consistently, day after day, week after week, paycheck after paycheck. These small incremental habits will not appear to make much difference at first. But that's the beauty of compound interest. What happens over time is those small investments, both physical and financial, begin to pay dividends. And those results become exponential. Both with running and with investing, you get more than what you put in. A lot more. And the earlier you start, the greater your returns. At least for the vast majority of us. The concept of starting early served Raj Anapuzha well when it came to his financial success. But his running success actually came quite the opposite. Raj jumped into investment banking right out of university and followed his own advice of taking small amounts from each paycheck and saving it for investing. But his running journey didn't begin until his late 40s, tackling his first marathon after 50. Now an avid runner, blessed with good genetics and an incredible work ethic, Raj has seen his times drop to staggering levels. Having qualified for Boston for the past 3 years, it's obvious that Raj has the same gift for running that he does for investing in the markets. Listen in on how he established regular routines and precise principles that served him well both in finance and in long-distance running. Now hosting his own podcast, Running and Fitness with Raj, he interviews the top coaches, athletes, and specialists in the world of endurance sports, taking that same passion for running and investing to the world of podcasting. Check out my incredible conversation with Raj Anapuzha.
Boston run the Boston Marathon this year.
I knew you had qualified for it a few times.
Yeah. So so this is like 5th to 14th is the window that Boston Athletic Association has given to athletes around the world to run the virtual. So I'm planning to do it on this Saturday. There are a couple of others, actually 4 of us who are in Mumbai who have qualified and who are running. So we are all planning to do it together end of this week, actually Saturday.
Awesome.
So kind of taking everything easy, just making sure our body is adequately rested and hydrated, trying to get a nap.
Yeah, you're in the recovery zone until race day, I guess, huh?
Yeah, very much. But just keep moving every day a little bit, maybe 30 to 45 minutes, get some very easy runs in. So so it's been it's been a bit quiet.
So who mapped out the course for you guys for this virtual
actually,
run?
we just discussed it, and we have worked out close to a 6-mile loop. So there is a very nice promenade in Mumbai, which is a one way. It is one end to another is about 3 miles. So you do up and down that 6 miles. So you do that 4 times. That's close to 24 miles, a little over 24 miles, and then you just do a little bit to get to your 26.2. It's a nice promenade. It's quite wide. We chose Saturday because Sunday it gets a little more crowded and there are a lot more cyclists. Not that the cyclists are on the promenade, but still it just gets a bit more crowded. So I checked it out a couple of weeks back. It's fine. So we are planning to start really early because Mumbai, as you may know, is pretty warm through the year. So we are starting hopefully by 4 a.m. and hope to finish by So that's the whole plan. So let's see how it goes.
Well, I like the out and back concept because you're constantly passing each other and you're constantly kind of reconnecting. And a lot of these other races, it can get kind of lonely out there. So that back and forth.
By definition, this is a lonely race, right? I mean, it's not like a proper race and there are not going to be anybody really cheering you. Maybe a couple of friends or family members may come there. But other than that, it's not. That's one. Secondly, the most important advantage is, this is almost like a self-supported trail race or something like that, right? So at least with this approach, you can keep your things at one, each end. and just get somebody to just look after the hydration and things like that, so you don't have to carry everything with you. So that's a big advantage. So you can pick up a fresh bottle of water, or just stop and hydrate yourself, get your gel or whatever you want to do. So yeah, I mean, so I'm looking forward to it. I mean, obviously all of us are going to take it very easy with the focus of just completing the race rather than go for
Right.
any glorified timings or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to get motivated for a PR when it's a virtual race kind of situation.
Absolutely. And plus, see, for most people around the world, what the reality of the matter is that their training would not have been anywhere near what they should be doing if they are training for a PR. For the vast majority of people, so I'm in these running groups, and they talk about that. Most people are not. You just, there is no point in pushing yourself.
Right. Well, I like I love that we're doing something with these virtual races. I love the idea of just creating something. But to me, these virtual races, they just don't resonate with me. I did one, it was a Yeti 24-hour thing where you run like 5 miles every 24 hour or every 4 hours over the course of 24 hours. And that was kind of fun. It was kind of different. But these virtual races, they just don't really have the appeal to me. But I tell you what, I do like the trail races that we do here in Atlanta. Were one of the first to start happening, and they've actually been going on for a little while now. And it's been great to be back and to have that in-person situation again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Actually, I mean, it's really heartening to hear that actual races have started happening anywhere in the world, for that matter. In fact, this Sunday will probably be the first mass participation road event in the world. If I remember correctly, Hamburg Marathon is going ahead in Germany on the 13th.
Awesome.
Yeah. And Hamburg is not a small marathon. It has about 10,000 participants, and they are going ahead.
Excellent. Oh, I love to hear that. And in Germany too. That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if you're good with it, let's go ahead and jump right in.
Yeah, sure. Let's roll.
Cool. This is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Raj Anapuzha. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Nate. And how are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Coming to us live from Mumbai, India.
Yes.
Other side of the world.
Yeah.
For those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So as you said, I live in Mumbai in India. I'm 53 years of age. I've been, in terms of my personal life, I'm married. I have 2 children and one wife, and we have been living in Mumbai for well over 20 years now, and except for a few years which we spent in Hong Kong. I am originally from the southern Indian state of Kerala, but I came to work here in Mumbai, as I said, more than 20 years back. I am a financial advisor currently. I have worked in banking, in helping companies raise money from the markets, and now I do more an entrepreneurial role along with a couple of my ex-colleagues. We are a very small firm. I joined up with my ex-colleagues about 3 years back. I'm very passionate about running, which I took up in right earnest about 5 years back. I run marathons and half marathons. I am a road runner. I have recently gotten into podcasting, which is now the latest passion of mine. So that's a little bit about me. I love traveling. I love reading. I love meeting new people. So it's lovely to talk to you, and lovely to talk to you to your listeners through you.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the podcast is a great place to start because it kind of, you jumped into running kind of in the later stages of life, and then now you've jumped into podcasting in a similar fashion. So tell everybody about your podcast, the name of it, and what it's about.
Sure. So actually, my running and my podcasting are quite linked because, as I said, I started running seriously sometime in the second half of 2015, which was about 5 years back. And I also became a student of endurance sports. I started developing a curiosity about all things about endurance sports. So not just running, about fitness, about well-being, about the mental side of things. And as I developed that interest, I started reading a lot. I came across many good podcasts. And what happened is that I also realized that a podcast which is dedicated to the Indian audience, which covers these topics of running, fitness, health and well-being all put together, is there aren't too many of them. Let me not be arrogant to say that there isn't any, but there aren't too many of them. So I thought, why don't I start doing it? And because I started benefiting enormously, and I continue to be benefit enormously by listening to these podcasts and following experts and others who are much more experienced and accomplished than me. So they are very related. I started doing the podcast in this year. It's called Running and Fitness with Raj. It's a completely interview based podcast, so I publish weekly every Monday, and I interview a cross section of experts. So they are world class athletes, where they are world class runners, they are world class coaches, they are sports scientists, nutritionists, sports psychologists, physiotherapists. So you get the idea. So every week I interview one guest, and the idea really is to give specific and actionable advice to listeners. So it is not very theoretical. In every episode, I try to bring out a few ideas which then the listeners can put in their daily living and training. So that's really the way I'm going about it. I'm really enjoying the journey. It's on all podcast platform: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora. All of the podcast platforms. Yeah. So it's been a very, very interesting journey.
Yeah, and we'll have links to the podcast in the show notes as well. But one of the things there's a couple of things I liked in particular about your podcast that really I identified with. Number one, you found a niche, and your niche is like really a billion people. Your niche is the Indian market and appealing to runners in India specifically. And I think so many of us, we think these grandiose, broad perspectives, or we have blinders on and don't think about what some of those niches could be. We don't really dive into a specific enough market. And I think you've done a brilliant job with that. But then when you, in creating that niche and creating that podcast, you've actually, like, the content you're creating really appeals to me as a runner in the United States. Like all the people that you're interviewing, I've already listened to a bunch of the podcast episodes and they all appeal directly to, for me. So even though your target market is the Indian market, and there's certainly an appeal there, you're really casting a much broader spectrum with what you're doing. I love it.
Yeah. So my idea, Nate, is that look, by the very definition that I'm based in India, and the way I can promote the podcast and all will be more India focused. I don't want to create an Indian podcast. My idea is to create a podcast which is in running and fitness, which is as world class as possible. So if you notice, of the 20 odd episodes maybe I have published, there are only 3 or 4 people who are from India, because I have interviewed guests from all around the world, right from Australia to Norway to Portugal, to a lot of guests from USA as well, and I will continue to do that. So expertise is not geographically limited. Experts can be anywhere in the world, and as long as they are willing to come on the show and talk, I think so that's really the idea, and that's the way I want to go about it.
Yeah, that's one of the cool aspects about podcasting, is how global it is and how accessible it is to anyone. All you have to do is be able to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for your kind words, and thanks for putting it in the show notes whenever you publish the episode.
Oh, most definitely. Well, and the other aspect of your podcast I like as well is a lot of the coaches and people that you interview end up having not just a running background, but some kind of, like in my case, what I really like is like the triathlon coaches and the triathlon background and the endurance folks. They're not just road runners full on.
Yeah, absolutely. So see, many of the people who talk about aspects like, let's say, hydration or nutrition, or the authors, like I've had authors like Alex Hutchinson and Matt Fitzgerald coming on the show. I mean, they may have a primary sport, but they are not restricted to a single sport. They talk to a broad cross section of athletes, and more broadly, people who are interested in health and well-being in general. So that's really the idea.
Yeah, I loved what Coach Fitzgerald had to say. He had that two-part podcast was that one was phenomenal. That was some great content there. So you've got some great guests, but you also have a great story yourself. So you didn't even do your first marathon until you were in your 50s, but even the half marathon started later on in life. So what was it that kickstarted this kind of new running career, if you will, at such a late age?
So, look, I guess like many people, and certainly in my case, I would say that for a very long time, I was not doing any physical activity with any amount of discipline. So it was all focused on family, your career, your job, your work, and I didn't, unlike many people, I didn't have a particular health trigger to start getting into it. But in my late 40s, as I said, I was 48 when I started getting a bit more serious about a physical activity. And initially I was not really considering running because I thought it's a monotonous sport. You just go out there, run. And I was thinking, what's so fun about it, and things like that. So I was working in a company at that time, which was also the sponsor of the Mumbai Marathon where I live. And there, I had a few colleagues who had, run half marathons, and they were generally disciplined about their running. And a few of them encouraged me to give it a try, and that's how I got into running specifically. Now, as I said, I didn't have a particular health trigger or anything like that, but clearly that yearning to do something a little more disciplined with some sort of a physical activity. And it could very well have been picking up a sport like squash, or it could have been doing, gym work 3-4 times a week, or it could have been yoga, it could have been anything. It just happened, circumstances just came together, and I picked up running. And later, when I look back, I realize also running is a relatively easy sport to get into, because generally in most places, and certainly in urban areas like Mumbai, you will have a running club not too far from where you are. So, and it's a good community. You don't need too much of equipment. All you need is a decent pair of running shoes, and some amount of motivation to start showing up 3-4 times a week. So that's how the whole journey started. What kept me motivated was, surprisingly, I started seeing very good improvements. And right from my first race, I started getting results which were beyond what I expected going into the race. And as you can well imagine, like anything else in life, the biggest motivation is, or one of the biggest motivators surely, is when you see results which are a bit beyond your expectations. So then I started realizing that, okay, if I put more systematic effort into this, I really don't know what improvements I can see, because I haven't really tried it for all these years. So now what motivates me is the fact that I genuinely don't know where my ceiling is. And I want to keep pushing it and see how much I can improve. So that's really the story.
And so we do have a lot of road runners and endurance athletes that listen to this show. To just give them some perspective, what is your PR in the marathon now?
So my PR currently is 3 hours and 20 minutes, which I ran in Chicago last year, in October 2019. One of the last races, I would say, which
happened. Qualified you for Boston, correct?
Yeah, that would have been the third time I qualified for Boston. So that time is good for 2021, if and when it happens.
So only 5 years in the sport, and you're already in that 3:30 range. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that's for those who do this. I mean, I would have, if somebody had told me when I started running that I would run a sub 3:30 marathon in a few years, I would have told that person, can I have what you are smoking, right? I mean, like, so yeah, so that in itself, is acting as a big motivator. And I don't do anything special, except that I'm very disciplined. So if you put me in a training cycle of let's say 16 weeks or so, pretty much I would hit 85 to 90% of the workouts. I will show up, I will do it, even though there are many days when you are not feeling particularly motivated. So that discipline is there in me, and which is again something I never really realized till I got into running at this stage, that I still have some amount of inherent discipline and commitment to something new that I'm picking up. And I'm still novice, I'm still a infant when it comes to the sport. There is so much more to learn. But yeah, so if you are improving, then why don't you keep pushing to see how far you can go? That's really my motto.
Well, and with your podcast, you're getting tips from really like the best in the world. So,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
if you're not improving, then you're not listening to what they're saying, obviously, right?
That's true. That's true. As I was telling some friends, who was telling how is it going, I said, look, most of the guests, or in fact, all the guests I am talking to, frankly, I want to talk to them. So, the podcast is an added bonus, because, if they are willing to give me an hour of their life on a one-on-one basis, I mean, like, I will grab the opportunity and I want to talk to them. So that's exactly what I've been doing.
Yeah, you or I are both in that same boat. We created our podcast to utilize it to talk to the people we want to talk to get in front of those really, really smart individuals. So yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Means to the madness, if you will.
That's true.
So one of the things I like to talk to my endurance athlete interviews about is the wall.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, the wall is classically tied to the marathon, but it really happens with any endurance sport. And it's, for those who don't know or who haven't experienced a marathon, you're going right along, you're kind of cruising right along as you should according to plan. And then all of a sudden at some point, usually somewhere between mile 18, mile 22, 3-4 hours in, the wheels come off. Everything falls apart. Your body breaks down. You feel completely broken. Your mind shuts off. Everything in your body tells you that you have to quit. You must stop. You cannot keep going. You cannot take another step. And I love hearing the stories about when people push through that wall and what that experience is like. So would you mind sharing an experience that you had in going through that wall process?
Yeah, sure. So this happened in my third marathon last year, and so there are two main reasons.
Which one?
This was in London last year. London in April of 2019. This is, as far as I have understood, you hit the wall because of two main reasons. One is basically you haven't fueled yourself enough in the early part of the race, or you haven't even fueled yourself well before the start of the race. So the body can only store so much of carbs or glycogen, and you are burning through it. And if you haven't fueled yourself well, you simply run out of glycogen or glucose reserves in your body, and you cannot proceed. And as you said, Nate, it typically happens anywhere between 18 to 22 miles, when literally you just come to a screeching halt. I mean, you just don't have the energy, and then by then for most people it's quite late for you to then take some nourishment, some food, and expect to continue in the same way as you would like to do. That is one part of it. The second part of it is that you may have done all the work in terms of your nutrition and hydration correctly or broadly correctly, but you end up going out too fast. So you ran a race which was not a smart race. In hindsight, you went ahead which is a classical mistake which many runners make. And in my case, I made that mistake. And just to give you some context, I ran a very good marathon in New Delhi in February last year. London was exactly 8 weeks after that. My training post that Delhi marathon in that 8 weeks leading up to London had gone extremely well. In fact, even now when I look back in terms of my confidence, in terms of how good my training was, it was probably the most well-prepared marathon I went into. And that is not to say that I went in with any arrogance, but I went in with a lot of confidence. But the mistake I did is in the first part of the race, in fact, all the way up to 16 miles, when I look back, I went a little faster than what I should have, and not by much. Maybe, consistently 10 seconds to 15 seconds more on an average per mile, which is quite a lot, when you look back. And I paid an extremely heavy price. So after about 18 miles or so, my 18th or 19th mile, I completely got crushed. I started walking. I just wanted the whole thing to get over. And the other thing which happens in the wall is also, people who have gone through it will tell you, is that your mind is now completely fogged. I mean, you are basically defeated. You are defeated physically, and that leads to a complete mental defeat. I went through all of that. I just wanted the race to end, like, that's, and I obviously didn't walk off the course, but it was really, really a bad experience. And I was telling myself that, what have you gotten yourself into? And it was so deflating, because, as I said, my mindset going into the race was so positive. And as I said, I was not arrogant, but I was very positive, very confident. And in a matter of about 2.5 to 3 hours, like, I'm in I'm in an entirely different place. So that was a very hard lesson for me. I experienced it. I really struggled to finish the race. And I mean, just to give you some numbers, in the first 16 miles, I ran in exactly 2 hours plus maybe a few seconds. And the next, 10 miles took me almost 90 minutes. So that gives you a sense of what sort of a struggle it was.
Yeah.
And most importantly, as I said, it's the like the sheer feeling of being defeated, that crushes you, crushes your soul in that period. So yeah, so that was
Well, and it's why I have so much respect for endurance athletes, marathon runners, anyone who dives into this sport, is because we're all going to experience that wall process at some point. And what's so fascinating to me is the other side of that. Once you come through that process, once you survive and just see it through and not give up and not quit, then at some point everything kind of comes back together. So at some point, the race, you realize that you're not going to die. You realize that you do have a little something more to give. And every time you go through that experience, I just think it builds that mental character just as much, if not more so, than the physical.
No, absolutely. I think it's obviously an experience I don't want anybody to go through. First of all, let me make it very clear, and there are enough stories and enough people who have experienced it. So for me, the basic lesson remains that, be very, very careful, continue to be careful, extremely careful in the first half to maybe 18-20 miles of a marathon, because as any experienced marathoner will tell you, the last 6 miles is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So
Yeah. Now, those last 6 miles are the truth tellers.
yeah,
They
absolutely.
really, if you've trained properly, it'll show up. If you haven't put in the work, that's when it shows up for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely, 100%.
So let me ask you this. As a runner, one of the questions I like to ask all my guests, what's your favorite item under $100 that you could not live without?
Oh, well, I have two. One is the anti-chafing cream, right? I mean, that is that probably costs, I don't know, $1 or $2, but not a single run I will go out without applying that. And then I love this company from the US, the Naked Band. They make these waist belts, which are I think $40-50, where you can keep your small water bottles and your gels and things like that. That's extremely useful. So those are two my favorite pieces of gear when it comes to
So the naked waistband for your phone and your gels and all that stuff. And then, of course, the number one answer of all my endurance athlete guests is that anti-chafe cream. Now, so in India, I'm very curious. You probably don't necessarily maybe have Body Glide. That's the brand that I particularly choose to use. What brand or what type of anti-chafing cream do you like?
brand. Vaseline is, which is a petroleum jelly, basically.
Oh,
Vaseline is
sure.
extremely popular, but pretty much you can use any I guess body cream, right? I mean, it's for most people it would work, but Vaseline is probably the most popular in India. I would suspect. I mean, I don't know for sure, but certainly.
And if you're in a pinch, any kind of diaper rash ointment, anything that you
Yeah,
use on a baby's behind will work good for us.
absolutely, because that's you miss doing that. The stories you have heard is legendary, right? I mean, you can literally not finish your race if if you haven't paid attention to that, right? I mean, so it's
It's those little details that make the
yeah,
difference in a
oh,
big race like
absolutely.
that.
This is an absolute must. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anyone that had an impact on you personally, as far as running goes? Before we shift gears and start talking about some of the financial stuff.
Oh, so in terms of running, I think the person whom I would love to meet or talk to at least once in my life is Scott Hurek. He's a quite a legendary runner. I know he's more a ultra marathoner and probably not so much into marathons or shorter distances, but his books and the entire way he has constructed his life about around the vegan lifestyle and sticking to it, and the amount that he has contributed to the the endurance sport. So he's I mean, it's somebody whom I really look up to. But as I said, I have never met him and all of that. So, but he's a guy I really respect. And then I'm a big fan of endurance athletes in general. So there are a number of them obviously in the current crop. If you look at runners like Bekele and Eliud Kipchoge, I am a big fan of Paula Radcliffe, who retired a few years back. A number of other U.S. Road runners like Ryan Hall, then Des Linden. So you name, I'm a big fan of those runners, and I follow them. Yeah, so those are some of my favorite runners. Not runners, just I mean, these are all people whom I look up to, and I read about them and try to emulate some of their best practices. Yeah.
Yeah, the ultra runner guys really appeal to me because it's such a like a lifestyle design kind of thing. It's really
Absolutely.
like an all encompassing aspect. Some of the road running can be so much more kind of like training sports, and like this is just like an activity versus creating a whole lifestyle around it. So on that note, I'm very curious. As I was preparing for this interview, I noticed that you've started doing some swimming. And the natural progression, at least for a lot of us here in the States, is once you've kind of gone down that marathon path for a while, the natural progression is then to head down a path towards triathlon. So is that something that you're considering now that you've got the swimming part down, or have you considered even diving into that realm?
I have considered, although I have not put myself in. I have not given myself any time frame for that. I want to try it and probably start with the shorter distances like the Olympic triathlon and all of that. I would. I will definitely do it, but it may take me a few years because for me right now I want to see how much I can improve in the marathon over the next few years so far, and I'm a sort of a person who don't like to commit to too many races in a year. I like training all year around, but I don't want to stress myself by committing to too many races. I think for the maybe I think for the next couple of years, 21, 22, 2021, 22, I'll probably stick to just marathoning and probably not even look at, any distance even longer than the marathon. And then, after that, slowly think of doing triathlons.
Nice. Well, yeah, get at least a decade under your belt, right?
Something like that. I mean, but,
Most of us have been doing it for a lot longer than that. So
yeah. So yeah, so that it is definitely it's definitely on my radar. When exactly I will start doing triathlons, I don't know.
let me ask you this: did you see a benefit in your running from your swim training?
Not like, look, I have not incorporated swim training too much while I am training for my running. So my cross
Gotcha.
training mostly is strength workout. I'm sure swimming will help improve your breathing if nothing else, and I'm sure there are multiple other benefits as well. And of course swimming is a is much less stressful on your joints, so to that extent it's a wonderful cross training. But mostly my cross training is strength training, and that too I try to do exercises with weights which are tailored to running, so compound exercises and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see a lot of people are beginning to realize a lot of the benefit from strength training in running and how it can relate. I've noticed it particularly on the endurance side and those 100 milers. If you look at a lot of these 100 milers, man, they just have tree trunks for legs.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so stacked. So I think that strength training has a lot of benefit that we haven't fully realized yet.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have no doubt strength training helps. In my own case, I can tell you that you just feel stronger, you feel less fatigued. Overall recovery, I feel, is better. So there are multiple benefits I have seen for myself.
That's great. Well, you've definitely come a long way. It's been really cool to see the journey, jumping into running and all that. So let's shift gears a little bit. Running is the hobby, and that's how we kind of came to know each other. But your career has been spent in the financial realm and helping others with investing and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's true. So for the longest part, I was helping companies raise money from the public markets, mainly in equity, but I have also done in on the debt side. And I worked, as I said, predominantly I worked in India, but I worked a few years in Hong Kong as well. So companies in the Asian region, I have helped raise capital, and that's really been my that's really been my career. And in the last 3 odd years, I've been involved with a company where I am also invested. It's a very, very small company in the context of financial services, where we advise clients to manage their financial investments. So that's what we do.
Yeah, you're managing personal finances of individuals more
That's
so
correct.
than
That's
like
correct.
banks or
So,
finance
no,
corporations.
not banks or financial institutions, just
Right.
individuals. We help plan their financial investments. Yeah.
Well, and the one thing the main strategy that you talk about that I really relate to, or that makes a lot of sense to me, is this very similar way that you approach the marathon or you approach any long distance race. You got to start small and do these little small steps. The only way you get to 26 miles is you learn how to do a mile first. And that starts as literally as simple as putting one foot in front of the other. And your savings and investment strategy starts in a very similar way of starting small and just taking a little bit each week, setting that aside. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, look, I think we all know this word compounding, right? Compounding. Everybody knows this word, but the reality is that a lot of people underestimate the power of compounding when it comes to whether it's investing, whether it's endurance training. The little by little, when you start stacking up, whether it is a little savings here or a workout here, it adds up and it compounds and it multiplies very, very rapidly. So it may, at the moment, it may look like a very small investment you are making, whether it's a financial investment or a training investment, but in reality, if you do it consistently, the power of compounding takes care of the rest. And my favorite example is, just to talk a little bit with numbers. Let's say there is an individual who saves $500 a month, every month of the year. So that individual is saving $6,000 a year, and let's say that individual does it for 20 years. So 20 into $6,000 is $120,000, and let's say that person got about 9% return on that. After 20 years, that person will have something like $340,000, even though they have only invested 120. Now let's look at another person who started just 5 years later. So that person has now not saved for 20 years but only 15 years. But just to make the initial investment the same, let's say this person saves equivalent amount over the next 15 years. So this person also puts in $120,000, but it's only invested over 15 years. That second person only ends up with about $230,000. So see the difference. Both of them in absolute amount saved the same $120,000 over 20 years. The only difference is that one of them saved for all of the 20 years, the other person only saved for 15 years, and the first 5 years they didn't do anything. So the compounding makes a huge difference when it comes to financial investments, and it's the same as I have understood from experts when it comes to training. So today may be an easy run of 5 miles or 6 miles. You may think you will probably go out for the run and come back absolutely not feeling anything, probably as fresh as you when you went out. But in the background, your body is adapting. You have become a little more efficient, and you do that week after week, month after month. All of a sudden, the gains are tremendous. So I see a major parallel between investing and any activity which you, or any habit which you consistently stick to, and the gains are tremendous. And I don't think a lot of people understand the power of compounding.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Einstein was after he had discovered the math behind the nuclear fusion and fission. They asked, "What's the most powerful thing in the world?" And his answer was compound interest. It wasn't a nuclear explosion; it was compound interest.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
people and very few people realize how that is the backbone of our economy. I mean, how that structure supports capitalism, supports the economic engine that provides for so many of us.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And as more people realize it, the better off everybody would be, in my view.
Well, and it's funny too because when we're doing those little runs that we don't want to do, those runs in the rain, those experiences that are kind of miserable, we're wondering why are we doing this. We always say, "Well, we're putting it in the bank.
Yeah.
We're banking that one," and those workouts are getting banked, and they do pay off. And come race day for sure. So yeah, it's a great parallel for sure. Okay, so that's some really good advice that you try to start everyone off with right out of the gate. What's some of the worst advice or some bad advice that you hear on the financial side?
Well, I think the one, it's not generally restricted to the financial world. A lot of people actually try to talk you out of things and say that, look, don't try that, it's too difficult. And it's and I'm not obviously talking about designing a rocket to go to Mars or something like that. I mean, that may be out of the possibility for most people. But things like starting to save and invest. For example, a lot of people, and I don't know about the US as much, but I'm assuming even in the US there are a lot of people who are very intimidated by, let's say, the stock market, and they think it's a casino and things like that. But learning some of the basic stuff, whether it is in financial, about your own finance or about your own health, these are things which, in terms of worst advice, a lot of people try to put you off by saying that it's very difficult. Surely you are not trying to get an expertise like a person who has worked in financial services for 30 years or a MD doctor, but taking some sort of an accountability and trying to understand a bit more on health and finance, which are things which greatly affect your life. I think it's very, very important. So the worst advice I would say is when people discourage you from taking baby steps and small steps. I don't think those people know what they are talking about. And unless you go and commit yourself and start to learn for yourself, you never know whether you are going to be good at it or not good at it. So it's something which is more generic. It's not just around finance, which I hear.
Yeah, I like the concept of start ugly. Just start doing something, try it, and then see if it works. Get better at something as you go. I think that's great. So I do like to try to give some real practical advice to my listeners. So all right, so we've talked about some good advice right out of the gate. Right out of the gate, you should be saving on a regular, consistent basis, and starting small. Once you're doing that, what's some of and you've kind of starting to build this nest egg, starting to build some financial security. What's some practical advice that you would give to somebody like, say, me, who's now we're doing that saving? Now, what do we do with that money? What are some of the initial steps to begin to build long-term wealth?
So, look, I think it's quite established that over a very long period of time, when it comes to financial investments or savings, financial savings. So, I'm obviously not talking about real estate and gold and other assets. But when it comes to your stock market, gives you over a long period of time, stock market gives you a return which definitely beats the inflation rate. So, if you look at the US 90-year returns of your, let's say S&P 500, it's about 9.8% or so, if I remember my number. And it's volatile. You will have years in which it has come down, years in which it has gone up much more than, etc., etc., but over long periods of time. And somebody who's got let's say any sort of regular income, steady income over a period of time, should have a good proportion of their savings in the stock market, because generally stock market returns over a long period of time will beat bond returns. Generally, I'm talking about that. Now,
For sure.
the younger you are, you can take more risks, so the a higher proportion you can you should invest in the stock market. So that's one piece of advice I would say. And then when it comes to stock market, you absolutely have to be disciplined to put away the same amount of money, or broadly the same amount of money every month. Because the worst thing that a lot of investors like you and me and retail investors do is that when the markets come down, we panic, we get out of the market, we have a very panicked reaction, and that is extremely detrimental to your portfolio. In fact, the Vanguard founder said it best when he, John Bogle, when he says it, you are you will do very well if you just invest and just forget about it. Don't worry about it. Just let it be just there. It will do its work. It will go up, come down, etc. But over a period of time, you are going to make a decent return on that investment. So 2 points: one, invest a particular amount of money every month, or with consistent period, in whether it is monthly, weekly, whether it is every quarter, that's up to you. But don't worry about the markets going up and down, because when you are investing the same amount, what's happening is if the markets go down, you are buying more. When the markets go up, you are buying less, because the amount you are investing is the same. Just stick with it. And there are you can just buy some index funds, or you can give your money over to a active asset manager who can, if that's your, there are multiple options, and I'm not getting into who is better, who's not, but there are very, very good options. And entering and financial savings is not very difficult for most people. So consistency and giving it a genuine long-term effect, basically, I'm talking about 10 years, 15 years. That's how you will build, and then the power of compounding will take care of itself. And you will have periods when when your amount you have invested may come down a little bit. It may it may shoot up quite dramatically, like what we have seen in the last few years. But overall, you will beat inflation, and you will be in a much better position than when you started. So that's really my my advice to people. And frankly, just like health, I am of the strong opinion that people have to take accountability for their financial health. There is nobody is going to hand it to you, so you have to take accountability, and you have to create that nest egg.
Yeah, for sure. You cannot be relying on the government or Social Security or some of those types of vehicles to take care of you. What markets are you in? Just the New York Stock Exchange, or do you like other markets besides that?
So
NASDAQ?
look, I mean, obviously, when we advise clients, it's extremely India focused.
Right. That's why I was curious.
Personally, I also invest a bit in the US markets, and that bias is simply because I'm an English speaking guy. US is the largest and the most liquid market in the world. So if I want diversification, it's just the ease. It's simply the market which is most easy to access. That's the only reason. And I know that people invest in the Japanese markets and people invest in European. Nothing against that. I personally don't do that, because I have limitations on the time and time and effort I can put into that. And frankly, for the kind of amounts I invest, it doesn't make too much sense to invest in too many markets either. Then tracking becomes difficult and things like that. But yes, I like the US market. It is the most liquid, deepest market in the world. And there are multiple ways in which you can access the US market from most countries. I mean, obviously there are some countries which will restrict you, but from most countries you can access the US market.
I was going to ask, are the U.S. markets the most accessible?
I cannot answer that very clearly because I haven't really explored accessing other
Oh,
markets.
okay.
But I would, if I have to hazard a guess, I would say so, simply because, as I said, it's the largest, most liquid market in the world. There are far more established brokers and people who offer these services in the US to the international community than other places. So I would suspect that is true. And for people who are English speaking, it is obviously much easier to deal with in unlike, say, let's say, a Japanese stock market. So it's there is also the ease of transacting in the English language when it comes to the US markets.
I'm curious for you personally, you're kind of on the backside of your career and you've obviously able to do some investing at this stage in the game. Personally, what vehicles do you like? Do you prefer index funds? Are you more of a single stocks guy or what do you like? What do you
So
prefer?
I have, see, because I used to work in financial services and we used to have a lot of restrictions. I was never a single stock guy. I mean, obviously, you can invest in single stocks even if you work in financial services, but it's a little more cumbersome. You have to take too many approvals and all of that. So I was always a guy who handed over money to mutual funds or units, unit trusts,
Yeah.
or whatever.
As are most of us. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, so
that's
I was very
99%.
happy to do. I was very happy to do it. Uh, at the time when I was working more actively, index funds were not that. There weren't too many index funds in India. Now there is.
Right. They were a new concept
So
back then.
so I have not in the past invested too much in index funds, and that's primarily because you had much more choice in the active fund. So that's the only reason. I'm not making a comment index funds are better or worse, but it's just that it was not available. uh, I think there is a place for both. I'm not in the camp, I'm not a fanatic about it, because for some people the much lower cost of index funds and the fact that they track the index works better. For some people, and a more actively managed portfolio is what they like. I think there is a place for both in anybody's portfolio, but that's just my personal view. I know there are, it's a very, you will never get a agreement on this topic, because there are people who are on the extreme sides of this argument as well. But my view is that I personally am okay with either of them, and I think a mix of that is what I like.
Cool. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's pretty common for most of us. I mean, the single stock game kind of went away a while back, and I mean, there's these big investors that look for those opportunities, but
Yeah, so
obviously the
I do have a fairly strong view on single stock for most individuals like you, me, and people whose job is not really trading stocks, and that is
right.
twofold. One is, we, number one, do not have the resources to do an extensive research and be abreast and all of that, because we are not large enough for people to get the extremely high quality research, access to company managements and things like that. And we, most of us, won't have the time. I mean, forget even if we have the talent, we simply won't have the time. So
Right.
we neither have the access nor the time. So my view is that getting into the single stock game is a little bit tricky for individual investors. So generally, if you ask me, my friends and my family, when they ask me for advice, I try to steer them away from individual stocks and more to.
Well, yeah, and even if you have the time and even if you have the information, you still might not get it right
That's true.
at the end of the day.
That's absolutely true as well. So yeah, that's absolutely true.
So, being that you're kind of in those later stages, are you still pretty heavily on stocks because of your background and knowledge? Or are you starting to convert more over to bonds and more conservative investments?
No, so actually, see, I don't think I am too heavily into stocks. I try to keep a rough balance, by which what I mean is, the balance would probably be 40-60, 60-40, depending. See, unfortunately, what's happening is now, like if you take this year, obviously your stock portfolio, because all markets around the world are on fire. So
Right.
suddenly you find, as a percentage of what you have invested, your stocks have gone, even if you started the year at, let's say, 40%, it may be 45% now, simply I mean, you may not have put any additional money, but just because the stock prices have gone up so much and all of that. So, but I don't overemphasize one market or the other, and I personally believe that even as you get into the later stages of your life, a stock portfolio has a value in your portfolio, because certainly in markets like the US bond returns or risk free returns today are very, very low. In fact, it's almost close to zero in many countries. There is a almost one third of the corporate and government bonds are in Europe, for example, are now giving negative interest rates. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so stocks are unfortunately the only way where you can at least make some positive return. So stocks will continue to have a place in anybody's financial portfolio. That's my view.
Above and beyond financial stuff, I'm fascinated by where people grew up and their experiences and memories of childhood and growing up like that. Can you share an experience or a memory from childhood about growing up in India that would
Oh yeah,
speak of?
sure. So my fondest memories are like my dad used to work in the northeastern part of India in the tea gardens for a few years when I was growing up. This would have been when I would have been, let's say, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. In that age. A few years we never saw him except for our summer vacations, because he was working there and I was with my mother in literally the other end of India. And so I used to go along with my sister and my mother to this state called Assam in northeastern India, and it's full of tea gardens, and it's a beautiful part of the world. And we used to stay with him for 5 6 weeks, and I still remember like learning to ride a bike there and roaming around freely. And vast parts of that estate didn't even have paved roads, so it was all unpaved roads and almost trailish, if you can say, except that it was not particularly hilly. uh, yeah, so that was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, and the whole excitement of looking forward to the summer vacation, and then the heartbreak when you leave after seeing him, because that now for the next maybe 10 months you're not going to see him. So yeah, I mean, it was really bittersweet in terms of memories, but overall I would say that that's my fondest childhood memory for several years. So every year we did it maybe for 4 or 5 years.
Well, that's cool. That absence makes the heart grow fonder. So clearly, your dad played a role in your life as being an example and a mentor. Is there anybody else in your life that played a significant role
Well,
as a
somebody
mentor?
whom I really looked up to is my maternal grandfather. So he was a true Gandhian. He fought alongside Mahatma Gandhi during the independence struggle. He always,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So so he has been arrested multiple times. He went to jail, and all of that. And he's really followed the principles of frugality, living a simple life, being extremely disciplined. And he was a professor. He used to teach the Hindi language, and he was a professor in a college where I grew up. And he had a big impact in terms of somebody whom I genuinely look up to, who completely lived by his ideals and did not compromise. He didn't need anything, particularly material in his life. And all through, I mean, I have never seen him wear anything except those, white clothes, which we call in India khadi, which is the, the picture of Mahatma Gandhi you see with that with that cloth spinner, which is basically that, so and that's basically, cloth which is white in color and which is very simple. And he always used to, I mean, so I've never seen him wear, a trouser or a shorts or anything like that. And so a tremendous a life which was lived in that vein. So yeah, so he had a he's somebody more than an impact, I would say, somebody whom I really, really admire and look up to.
That's awesome. Very cool. We're so blessed to have people like that in our life
Oh, absolutely.
because they plant seeds in us that then grow into fruit later on, much later on in life for sure. So we're going to start wrapping things up and we'll start winding down. A lot of us in the Western society have gone to Eastern gurus, if you will, to look for advice and counsel and better understanding of life's purpose and things of that nature. And you being from India, you're kind of in that same realm, and you certainly have a guru kind of sense to you and all. So, what would be some advice from somebody growing up in Mumbai, India, that sees the US from the outside looking in? Would you have any advice for us or for me or for folks in the US as far as just life in general?
See, I think there is a growing confluence of good practices from the earlier ancient the ancient wisdom, so to speak, whether it is captured in Eastern teachings or in yogic teachings and things like that. I mean, it could be as mundane as doing breathing exercises regularly, to just eating whole foods and not having refined foods and things like that. And I think if somebody wants to move forward in life increasingly, especially in 21st century, I feel that having a healthy curiosity about some of these old practices and then marrying it with the progress that we have made in fields like science and medicine and other aspects will give you a far more rounded life, I feel, because there is a lot of wisdom in that ancient traditions. And I'm not just talking about Indian tradition. I'm sure for example, Native American tradition, for example, or traditions from Eastern, East Asia, or from South American cultures, so having a curiosity about some of those practices will definitely help you connect far more with nature. Because otherwise what happens, especially when we are living in a fast paced urban setting, is that it is far more materialistic what we are chasing. And I think that taking a pause and learning about some of these and incorporating it in your daily life, however small it may be 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day, I think over a period of time will make a big difference. So I think the only thing I can say is that develop a curiosity about some aspect of it and start learning a little more, and then see if it works for you, and I think it will help enormously.
That's great. I love that. The other philosophy that you preach and that really seems to resonate with me a lot is that you doing these small steps and to create that amount of wealth that allows you some flexibility in life. Like that's the first stage. And for so many people, we all get caught up on the wealth aspect and being successful to make lots of money. But what I like about what you say is that create that stability, that financial stability. That's crucial. That's step number one. But then once you have that financial stability, then it goes on into something more broader. Then money doesn't mean as much. Then it becomes much more about purpose and about happiness and about what you could ultimate good you can do with that money. And it doesn't just become about, well, how rich can I get or how many material things I can have. And I think that's a really great philosophy. And coming from somebody from India, I think it really resonates with me anyway.
Yeah, sure. Because what I find, what motivates me the most nowadays is if I can learn some new skill or something new. I mean, it could be a new language. It could be it could be anything. It could be doing something physical, or it could be doing something mental, and that gives you a lot more joy than an extra rupee or an extra dollar in your bank account. That's the way I think about it.
That learning mindset, man, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it just goes to show, I mean, that learning mindset can take a 50-year-old down a course of running marathons. It can take a mature adult down all kind of new paths, all kind of new opportunities, creating new podcasts. I mean, I was 40 something when I started my podcast, and when we have that learning mindset, it just opens us up to so many new potential opportunities and things to chances to grow. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Raj, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coordinating your schedule. I know we're on opposite sides of the world, so the timing wasn't exactly easy. As we wrap up, tell everybody where they can find you. Well, let's plug the podcast, and if there's any charitable organization or a company that you work with that you would like to give a shout out to, now would be a good opportunity to do that.
Sure. So my podcast is Running and Fitness with Raj. You can find it on pretty much all podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Pandora. I mean, whichever your favorite podcast app is, you will find me. You can drop me an email at runningandfitnesswithraj@gmail.com. That's RUNNINGANDFITNESS WITHRAJ@gmail.com. Any of my podcasts will have my Instagram handle, which is again Instagram, and my Facebook page is Running and Fitness with Raj. So yeah, you can find me. It's very easy. So that's so please get in touch with me if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, or if you listen to my podcast, if you have any guests that you think I should interview. I really appreciate. I don't work with any one charity, so I don't have anybody to shout out to. I do contribute to some charities in India, but not something I specifically attach myself to. I work with a few charities, and it kind of varies year to year. So yeah.
That's great. That's amazing. Well, and I'll tell you, if you want to learn about running, if you want to know more about endurance sports, and if you want to learn it from the experts in the field, that's the podcast to check out. It's an amazing podcast, and I've only got 3 or 4 episodes in, and I've already got a bunch of takeaways and guests I want to try to smuggle away from you and all kind of things. So it's been a huge asset and an invaluable resource to me, for sure.
Thank you, Nate. I really appreciate that, and thank you for inviting me. I loved speaking to you, and I hope listeners enjoy listening to us as well.
We'll have to pick us out a marathon, either stateside or somewhere that we can both get to, and we'll make a rendezvous out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I am really looking forward to doing more races in the US, and hopefully things will start opening up in the coming months, and hopefully certainly in some time in 2021. So I will definitely coordinate and see if we can meet person.
Well, I don't think I have much a shot for qualifying for Boston, but the next time you do, maybe I will rendezvous up there. I'll be in your cheering section.
And never say never. So who knows?
Hey, you never know. Yeah, we'll have to step up our game for sure. But hey, Raj, thanks for your time, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for listening. So, what'd you think? What did I miss? Was there a topic you wish we had covered? Was there an area of discussion you want to know more about? Or was the whole thing just too long? Please send us your questions and feedback on social media to @extraordinarypodcast, or check out our website, extraordinarypodcast.net. Subscribe there for all the latest episodes, blog posts, and more. And if you're tired of living the same old ordinary life, shoot me an email, nate@extraordinarypodcast.net, and I will send you your own customizable blueprint that will walk you through step by step how to create your own extraordinary life. And if you or someone you know already fits the profile, you can submit a request to be interviewed on the website as well. Finally, if you like what you heard or learned today, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and follow the Extraordinary Podcast on all your favorite platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you feel inspired, show your support for the show by donating through Patreon. It is through this financial support that we are able to continue to bring to light ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Thank you for your support, and most of all, just being you. This is Nate G, and we'll see you next week.